Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train.
Good morning, USA, and welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bus Show. Today's topic is who in hell could vote for Joe Biden? So we're looking at Joe here. He is telling a woman who asked him, could you accept as a running mate a Republican? And Joe said, well, yes, I would, but I can't think of who right now. And that makes some people lose their shit. David Dole, for example, he says, what? Joe Biden says he'll consider a Republican VP? And he's upset because no Republicans wanted to impeach Donald Trump, so that's why. And I say, well, there are good reasons to impeach Donald Trump, but not on the articles brought forth. Let's be fair. There are Republicans who are against pernicious trade agreements. There are Republicans who care about the American worker and all the jobs that have been lost. And if Joe Biden picked one of those as a running mate, it would be better than picking Hillary Clinton as a running mate, or Barack Obama, if he could, or Nancy Pelosi, or Chuck Schumer, or Tom Perez. Any honest Republican who wants to help American workers would be better than them. But that's not who Joe would pick. Joe is catering to a specific demographic. The party insiders of the DNC know this demographic, and they persuade this demographic to do their bidding in Hollywood and in the rest of the world too. It's a web, a very deceitful web, and what they're trying to do is block grubby insurgent populists such as Bernie Sanders. And to prove that point, just look at Donald Trump versus Bernie, a faux populist versus a true populist. The insiders would much rather have a fake populist who isn't going to actually change the status quo very much, as opposed to Bernie, who is an existential threat. So last time Joe didn't run, last time Elizabeth didn't run, and that was because they wanted to defer to Hillary, and they all thought Hillary would have no trouble keeping Bernie out. Now, Lynn says that the reason Warren and Biden stayed out last time was just to defer to Hillary. They didn't see Bernie was going to be as big of a problem as he turned out to be for the oligarch class. Hillary did keep Bernie out by hook and by crook. Now this time, there's no Hillary, although she may step in, who knows. But what we've got now is Pete and Elizabeth and Joe with one purpose from the perspective of the insiders. That one purpose is to keep Bernie Sanders from winning the nomination. And Pete and Elizabeth already have no chance because they have no black support, and they're not likely to get a lot more. That it should be clear to anybody in the know that the reason they're in it is to ensure a brokered convention. The insiders know, the insiders already know that none of the three, Joe, Elizabeth, or Pete, can possibly defeat Donald Trump because of the grubby populism in Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, in the other battleground states, and in other portions of states where populism is more powerful and important than elitism. So this whole election comes down to populism versus elitism. And all three of the candidates I keep talking about are elitists. And Bernie is not an elitist. So let's go to former elitist-in-chief Barack Obama. He has been trying to get people to support Elizabeth Warren. He's getting people to, like his 200 surrogates who all endorsed Elizabeth on the same day. He's trying to get people, rich donors in particular, to support Elizabeth Warren. Now he's saying that if she receives the endorsement, that they all have to jump behind her, as though he can command them, and maybe he can. Former President Obama has gone to bat for Warren when speaking to donors reluctant to support her given her knocks on Wall Street and the wealthy. But if Warren becomes a nominee, Obama has said they must throw the entirety of their support behind her. He knows that people will hear what he's saying, even in the press. But what they're not telling you is that he doesn't expect Warren to defeat Trump. He just wants all the rich assholes to prop up Warren long enough to make sure there's a brokered convention. He knows the game plan. If anyone knows the game plan, he and Hillary know the game plan. The game plan is to make sure that there aren't enough delegates in the first round to hand it to Bernie outright. That's why Biden's there. That's why Warren's there. That's why Pete's there. Just to make sure somehow that they keep Bernie out. I think they're getting more and more desperate. Now, my thrust, my raison d'etre, is to talk to the rich asshole regular voting people, not the insiders, but just regular Democrats, regular affluent, which means you're not regular, but the people who typically vote in primaries, the people who are affluent and educated, the wine track candidates that Crystal Ball mentions on The Hill Rising. You're the people we need to talk to, because without you, the party insiders can't carry out their nefarious plot. The rich assholes, billionaires who own us all, rely on their cronies in the suburbs and in other places, the ones who have money and education, wherever you live, whatever color your collar, but we're talking mostly to white-collar people. Your job is to block Bernie too. And you're marching along beautifully if you still are telling landline pollsters that you would like Joe Biden as opposed to Bernie Sanders. Or if you're telling them you would like Elizabeth Warren or Mayor Pete instead of Bernie Sanders. You're carrying out their plans beautifully. What we need to do, you affluent, educated, left-leaning, Democrat-leaning, you're not leftists really, Democrat-leaning voters, what we need to let you know is you can't defeat Donald Trump that way. Biden can't defeat Trump. Warren can't defeat Trump. Buttigieg can't defeat Trump. It's not going to happen. And it's because of the populists in the swing states. It's already impossible because not only will they not vote for your corporate candidate, the wine track Harvard candidate, they will vote directly for Donald Trump. Many of them will vote directly for Donald Trump. And this is devastating in the swing states. This is why there's no mathematical possibility for any of those three to beat Donald Trump in a general election. So, who are Joe Biden's supporters? One op-ed writer accidentally breaks it down. Now, this brilliant article is by Russell Dobelar, and he's making fun of Melissa Henneberger, a regular contributor to the Kansas City Star and the political editor for the Huffington Post. This is a 61-year-old wine track voter who writes, is a professional writer, and she recently published an article in USA Today that explains the unfathomable in a way that no other pundit has managed to do. Who the fuck are these people keeping Joe Biden at the top of the polls month after month? Have you ever been wondering that? Whether they're progressive, centrist, Republican, what have you, I've never talked to a single person who actually wants to see Joe Biden become the Democratic Party's nominee. At best, I've spoken to a few who have swallowed the electability narrative, but an enthusiastic Biden supporter is virtually impossible to find in the wild. We owe a debt, then, to Ms. Henneberger for voicing her full-throated support for Biden in a column that reflects not only her worldview, but in all likelihood the worldview of a lot of these mystery voters who think a man whose every public appearance is a nerve-wracking, suspense-filled exercise in waiting for him to say something horrible is the best person to run against Donald Trump. So let's start with the headline. Joe Biden is my Harvard, not my safety school. He really is my favorite 2020 Democrat. So listen, Mel. What is her name again? Her name is Melissa Henneberger. So listen, Mel. Can I call you Mel? I feel like if I'm going to break this down, we should get comfortable. I know that a Notre Dame graduate such as yourself, who earned her degree in European studies, of all things, in frickin' Belgium, of all places, is probably completely incapable of understanding the class implications of this headline. But as soon as you wrote it, you lost most of the voters who are going to decide the next election. Those would be the same voters who decided the last one. Blue-collar workers in the Midwest who are living in third world conditions right here in the United States of America. They don't have safety schools, and they generally don't go to Harvard or know anyone who has. Their choices aren't so much between Harvard and Notre Dame as they are between food and insulin. Really, if we consider your age, 61, and correlate it with this headline, we would stop right here with a pretty good understanding of where a large portion of Biden's support is coming from. But I have the morning free, so let's continue. And here's a quotation. I keep reading that no one, not even Jill Biden, actually prefers Joe Biden to the other Democratic presidential candidates. Supposedly, he is a frontrunner who is solely supported, with tiny sighs and great regret, by those too fearful to follow their hearts. My friend Walter Shapiro has written that Biden is the safety school of Democrats, regarded fondly, but the first choice of nobody. Okay, so to be fair, apparently you didn't start this whole safety school thing. You wrote this article in response to your friend Walter's article. I'm sure you and Walter had a delightful discussion about all this over drinks at some famous Washington watering hole favored by pundits and senators after your response went live. But listen, Mel, and this is just a suggestion, maybe if you want to really understand what's happening in the country, you need to stop taking your cues from folks like Walter and start spending a little more time with average people. Because this is starting to sound like a private conversation between two rich assholes that somehow spilled out into the public sphere. Early admission. He's my Harvard, okay? And I do not favor the former vice president because I think he has the best chance of winning, which may or may not be true. Instead, and by the way, it's not true, all the polls show that Bernie has the best chance of defeating Donald Trump, and they have for 4 years. Anyway, instead, if the contest were tomorrow, I'd vote Biden because I think he'd do the best job if we did manage to grab the wheel away from a president who reminds me more every day of Vinny the Chin Gigante, a mob boss who used to go around New York City in his bathrobe and house shoes babbling to himself. Vinny might have been faking madness to stay out of prison, but the guy currently faking sanity to stay in the Oval Office does a pretty good Vinny imitation all the time. I'd say Joe Biden is the one faking sanity. Anyway, again with the Harvard. Okay, I guess you're kind of locked into this conceit now, but Jesus and Trump bad. Trump bad. Got it. So why exactly do you feel Biden would be the best person to undo the Trump era? Do you have any policy positions of Biden's that you particularly favor, or any past accomplishments of Biden's that you can point to as evidence of his exceptional gifts? I'll wait. So how is it that everywhere I go, I meet Biden supporters who don't know they're settling? And how is it that only we non-existent Joe enthusiasts seem to be able to see each other? Well, since you're asking, Biden polls around 28-29%. That means about 2/3 of Democratic voters don't want him. The ones who do want him tend, like yourself, to be over 60. So it's probably just that you don't really speak to anyone outside your older, wealthy, white demographic, and that ends up giving you a warped impression of his level of support. Glad I could help. At a wedding in New York, changing planes in Washington, over coffee in Boston, and on my porch in Kansas City, what I hear from pro-Joe Democrats is hardly resignation, nor is it some complicated defeatist calculus about how appealing non-Trump-loving Republicans might find him. Sigh. Okay, Mel. Breaking down this article is kind of like watching someone shooting arrows all around the target, hitting every spot but the bullseye. You keep on answering your own question. Most people are lucky if they get to take a vacation once in a year. They aren't gallivanting all around the nation, attending weddings and grabbing coffee. Honestly, it sounds nice, but maybe having that lifestyle and surrounding yourself with people who also enjoy that lifestyle has made you completely useless as a political journalist, if the measure of usefulness is to actually understand things. Don't underestimate Biden. He knows what America needs and how to get it done. A childhood friend in Illinois talks about how blessedly comfortable Biden makes her feel. And if you think comfortable means meh, you must have slept through the past 3 fun-filled years. His authenticity and experience are exactly what the country needs now, says a former colleague in Florida. We get it. You know at least one well-connected rich person in every state, and you've polled all of them. I know this is an opinion piece, Mel, but even by op-ed standards, this is pretty lazy writing. You again offer no explanation as to why Biden is the best choice for the current moment, and your sources are a childhood friend and a former colleague who themselves have nothing meaningful to say about Biden. He makes one feel blessedly comfortable. And another admires his authenticity and experience. Might I ask if these friends of yours already have high-quality health insurance coverage? If the answer is no, I promise to meet you for coffee in whatever East Coast city you happen to be gathering the opinions of upper-class professionals in at the time, and offer you a face-to-face apology for this entire misunderstanding. And best of all, he would have no learning curve, so he could get right to work undoing the damage caused by what's-his-name, says a therapist in North Carolina. He's a good, honorable, smart, decent, civil man who has dedicated his entire life to public service, says Morna Murray, executive director of the Rhode Island Disability Law Center and former senior counsel to Senator Bob Casey. Oh, I know Bob Casey, Democrat PA. If there's ever was a useless individual, he was a great senator and vice president, and I'm pretty sure it does not get much better than that. Ooh. More state name dropping, more professional class friends who also like Joe Biden, and more vacuous quotes. By the way, Morna, speaking of vacuous quotes, are we talking about the same great senator who made it impossible to discharge student loans in bankruptcy, voted for the Iraq War, and whose crime bill was instrumental in incarcerating a generation of black men? Let me guess. You have no outstanding student loans, no one close to you had to serve in that war, and you have no experience of the criminal justice system except through your work as an attorney. GW Law Class of '86. I am me if I'm right. Joe Biden isn't the boringly reassuring candidate Democrats were hoping for. It's early in the campaign, and I'm not even trying to win converts. Love who you love, and I will too. But pundits, please stop insisting that nobody is excited about Biden's candidacy or that he's the head-over-heart guy who appeals only to those making a bloodless, Vulcan, and strictly strategic choice. No, Mel, you're right. If nothing else, you've convinced me that he's the passionate first choice of elderly elites. Point taken. An empathizer with a giant heart. Really, have you met Joe Biden, people? I ask because if you've glimpsed him at any point over the last 40 years, you may have noticed that his biggest selling point is his giant heart. And the way that after multiple tragedies, he walks through the world as the compassionate consoler and messy, highly emotional, and ever-ready empathizer we do need most right now. It's strange for those of us who appreciate these qualities in him most of all to then be told that we shouldn't be so passionless and practical in choosing a candidate. Privilege is ... having the luxury of prioritizing personal demeanor over actual policy. Here we are coming to the end of this article and your big pitch for Biden. You still haven't mentioned one way that Joe Biden has made the country better in the course of his decades-long political career, or one policy he's put forth that will make it better going forward. Your idea of a qualification seems to be, he's a nice guy. I'm sure he is a nice guy one-on-one. He's also made it harder for families to declare bankruptcy and made it easier to send people to jail for drug crimes. The performance of empathy and the practice of empathy are two different things, Mel. Where the latter is concerned, Biden has used his power in a way that's downright sociopathic. Why would we want to give him more of it? It's so painful to watch Biden being Al Gored, with every utterance shorn of context in service to the narrative. Then it was that Gore exaggerated. And he did. But the planet is considerably worse off today because we were saved from that nightmare. Today, of course, it's that Biden is gaffe prone, and he is, but by getting stuck on Biden gaffes as we did on Gore exaggerations, the planet will be worse off. Gaffes are when you mean to say, I love it here in New Hampshire, and you say, there's a pink elephant in my boat. In other words, if it's a gaffe, it doesn't actually reflect your worldview. It's just a random slip of the tongue. Biden classics like this description of Barack Obama. I mean, you got the first mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. He actually said that. Let me read that again. I mean, you got the first mainstream African-American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice-looking guy. I mean, that's a storybook, man. Holy fuck-a-moly. And the more recent suggestion that black parents don't know how to raise their children. Social workers help parents deal with how to raise their children. It's not like they don't want to help. They don't know what to do. That's not a gaffe. They're the views of an old white dude whose idea of what it means to be liberal was formed in Union Hall circa 1975. If you're comfortable electing someone with those views, you do you. But to suggest these are simple misstatements that don't reflect Biden's true feelings is a stretch. Now maybe this is not completely unlike that day in 4th grade when our teacher, Miss Wiswall, said, "No one in here still believes in Santa Claus, do they?" And I put my hand up and said, I do. Not because I didn't know the other kids would laugh, and not even because I believed in Santa Claus, but because I wished I did and wanted to stand up for innocence, or maybe just contrarianism, and against being told what to think. What if some other 9-year-old was sitting there crushed at the news? But back to Joe Biden. Him I do believe in. Well, if it's any consolation, Mel, I believe in Krampus. Well, what can I tell you, Mel? One person's idyllic vision of a simpler, more innocent world is another person's crushing lifetime student loan debt, Iraq War-induced PTSD, and/or draconian prison sentence. Like Joe Biden, I'm sure you're a very nice person one-on-one. If we ever do have that coffee, I bet you'll pick up the tab. But also, like Joe Biden, I don't think you really give a meaningful flying fuck about the real problems that real people are facing. I think you like to think you care, but you don't want to do the work that caring would involve. Like, for example, spending 5 minutes considering Joe Biden's record before writing something like this. Or spending an additional 5 minutes considering the impact those policies have had on people outside the coffee in Boston, wedding in New York set. I mean, you've been a professional journalist since the late 80s, Mel. You certainly have the training and resources to figure all this stuff out if you really wanted to. The fact that you haven't suggests that you don't. So listen, the next time you see Walter, tell him I said, Proletarier aller Länder, vereinigt euch! It'll probably scare the shit out of him, especially coming from you, but I'm sure it's nothing a few cocktails at Bullfeathers won't resolve. In case you are wondering, it means the proletariat of all lands, unite! But anyway, it's nothing a few cocktails at Bullfeathers won't resolve. Oh, and also, please, for the love of God and for the sake of the nation, stop cranking out this dreck. I promise you as I sit here at the writing desk that I rescued from the trash some 10 years ago and which now resides in the bedroom of my 5th floor Harlem walk-up, it ain't helping the situation. Not even a little bit. Sincerely yours, the unwashed masses. So, in case you were wondering, you shouldn't. I'm talking to the people who could read this drivel by Mel and agree with it and say, yeah, I think I'm going to keep telling the landline pollsters who call me that Joe Biden is my preference. And I don't care what the Bernie or bust people tell me that there's no possibility of electing him when Donald Trump is riding a good economy. I don't care what they say. And Elizabeth Warren, she has a plan for that. She has a white paper for that. She has a wonderful resume. As good as Hillary Clinton's, maybe. And then Mayor Pete, we know that he appeals to the same demographic, the wine cave, the wine track demographic, as Elizabeth Warren does. So I'm talking to you people. I'm talking to the comfortable people who live in nice places, who have nice cars, whose kids go to nice schools. The traditional liberal that Phil Oakes made fun of in his immortal song, Love Me, I'm a Liberal. You're the people I'm talking to. We need to help you understand so that you can help the insiders. You can help John Cowan of Third Way. You can help Neera Tanden of Center for American Progress. And you can help all these bloody pollsters who keep saying that Joe Biden is leading the nation. We need to get the word to you because you're being used. You're being used by the machinery, by the Clinton machine, by the Obama machine, by the transnational corporation, by the banksters, by the central bank hedge fund manager assholes. You're being used by them. You're their duped cronies. You're saying that Joe Biden is your Harvard. Well, that's very nice, but we need to get over that shit now.
Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back.